Welcome to Series 3 of the Space Podcast, the place where we dive into the stories, voices and ideas shaping a more inclusive workplace at Gowling WLG. I'm your host, Emma Dennis, and today I'm talking to Anna Fletcher, a partner in our employment team, who's retiring in December after an incredible 29 years with the firm. Anna's been a trailblazer in many ways, especially through her work around disability inclusion, both within our Enable network and through her personal story. A massive welcome, Anna. Thank you so much for being here today, and I have been really looking forward to having this conversation with you. Before we dive into the topic of disability, I'd really love to start by learning a bit more about your role at the firm, and just wondered if you could just tell me a bit about what your current role is.
Well, currently I'm a partner, but I started my career with the firm back in 1996 at Rag & Co, becoming a legal director in 2007 and then a partner in 2023.
And what team are you in?
I'm in the employment team.
What does a day in the employment team as a partner look like?
Every day is a school day. We can never predict what's going to be in the inbox from day to day. We've obviously do a lot of work with the corporate team, providing corporate support, and also work closely with the real estate team. But in terms of general advisory work, that's really about steering employers through just a raft of issues from recruitment, allegations of discrimination, grievances, exits, dealing with tribunal claims. So, I've decided that I'm never going to say I've seen it absolutely all, because I haven't. People behave in really random and strange ways, and our job is to try and help employers navigate that.
Amazing. And did you always know you wanted to be a lawyer?
Strangely enough, yes, I did. I'm not quite sure why. I think I can track it back to a very old afternoon TV programme called Crown Court. And it's not that I ever wanted to be a barrister particularly, but it was really interesting. And then I was particularly interested in employment law as an A-level student because my dad was made redundant and the process was managed really badly. And the people who were affected very badly. So it got me very interested in employment law as a topic.
And was partnership always the goal?
No, not at all. Actually, I guess I'm a succession candidate, but I just loved being in the thick of it, working with a whole range of amazing people across the firm, helping their clients navigate all those employment issues, and really just working closely with our team just to keep people at the tribunal in the nature of the work that I do predominantly, which is around advisory and contentious employment work.
I mentioned at the beginning that you've got lived experience of sight loss, and I just wondered if you could share a bit of your personal journey with that.
Absolutely. I first suffered issues with my vision back in 1997, and nobody was able to give my condition a name, which was quite scary. And this was kind of really not quite pre-internet, but really early internet days. So it was very difficult to go searching in any event, which is probably a good thing. And then I had a deterioration in my vision in 2004, at which point I got a diagnosis, and I suffer from a condition called PIC, which is a form of macular disease. Having been diagnosed, I got lots of support from the firm, but I really wasn't very confident about accepting my condition. So it wasn't until 2016 that I actually spoke really openly about my condition to an audience of about 100 people to help one of our former colleagues who was looking for folks to come and talk at an event about lived experience of disability.
Wow, that's throwing yourself in the deep end.
It was, but there were lots of smiling faces and lots of people who recognised people in the firm at the time who I was talking about, and people, in fact, who'd been in the firm providing me with support all those years back in the sort of late 1990s.
Having gone through that period of time then of having a diagnosis and then not being hugely open about that, how did that shape your professional life and your career?
Initially, it was really challenging. I struggled to read kind of normal size font, if you like. So if a client presented me with a set of documents and expected me to be able to scan through them, that was particularly difficult. But actually, with most of the clients I work with, I've always established a really good rapport. So I could say to them that I would need to take things away and sometimes get them blown up or printed off in larger size fonts. And I never actually came across a client who expressed any concern about that at all, which started to give me a bit more confidence about just being a bit more open about the challenges.
Did you tell people within your team?
Yeah, absolutely. And the team were amazing. I had an access to work coordinator who came in and did an assessment. I got a larger screen so that I could see more easily when I was looking at documents. In fact, I think the screen that I had at the time is probably the size of the screens that we have now. But it'd be fair to say I recall being the envy of the team because I had this enormous monitor to look at, and everyone thought it was amazing.
Over your career, what do you think have been the biggest challenges you've faced with regards to sight loss and work?
I think probably a couple of challenges. The first is that inability to scan documents, so it takes me longer to work my way through things. But on the other hand, I think it's almost improved my memory. I've got great memory for matter numbers, actually, when I'm doing time recording, because I can just see them visually. And I've discovered that that's something I think that has arisen really because I just have to use my brain in a very different way.
Yeah. Do you think there's any common misconceptions about sight loss or disability in general, actually, that you wish people understood?
I think there's a real misconception about what visual impairment means. I think people assume it means that the world has gone dark and you can't see anything at all. And obviously there are people who are blind. But in my case, it's about I guess, distortion and blurred vision. And there are lots of other conditions that manifest themselves in different ways. But the world isn't dark. The world is just, in my case, a bit blurry. And when it gets dark, a bit darker than it is probably for most people. So I think that it's really important to talk to people and ask them about their experience and have the confidence to do that. Most people have coping mechanisms and they're quite happy to talk to you about how they manage their day-to-day lives. I think on disability more generally, I think there are enormous stereotypes. And I think that particularly with invisible disability, it's really difficult, I think, to have confidence to ask questions for fear of upsetting people. But for most people who have the confidence to talk about their condition, actually, they welcome those conversations because it helps us all learn about how people deal with particular conditions. And I think that's particularly important with some of the stats around disability to know that, I think it's, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Emma, but 83% of people acquire a disability. So they're not born with their disability. So I think if you look around a room, we're looking at 4/5 of a room potentially with people who either have a disability or will develop a disability at some point. And I think we need to be really aware that it can impact anyone at any time.
Yeah, I think it's that is a really interesting stat. And you're right that so many disabilities are acquired over your lifetime, and particularly over your working lifetime as well, that I think I would struggle to find anybody who didn't either have a disability or know somebody that had a disability in some way or another.
Absolutely. And I think that's been one of the really, I suppose from my point of view, really sort of beneficial factor in my own experience, talking to our clients, because 20% of people who are working have a disability. And again, it's not about necessarily visible disability. So I spend a lot of time talking to clients about disability discrimination and encouraging them to be open and ask questions, provide support, and not just jump to conclusions about what people can't do, but be more focused on what people can do.
Exactly. You mentioned a moment ago around coping strategies, and I just wondered what coping strategies you have in place for sort of everyday today life.
Well, obviously I have the kind of equipment in the sense of my big screen, and I had an iPad, which I've had for many years now, because back in the days of BlackBerries, and in fact even now with iPhones, that was quite a challenge. So I could work off the iPad much more easily than off a BlackBerry. So that adaptation was helpful. I need to be really mindful about racing around too much or getting a bit stressed, because that impacts my vision. So I'm more likely to bump into something. So I'm very easily bruised, and I do find myself bumping into things quite a lot. My spatial awareness, particularly on my left side, is poor. So I just need to be careful about slowing down.
Yeah.
But other than that, I suppose the only other general frustration is I haven't been able to drive for about 20 years. Getting taxis and Ubers and what have you is fine, but you have to be more organised.
Yeah.
So I find that I have to think ahead about where I need to be and when I need to be there. And is there a train that's going to get me there? What else do I need to be thinking about? And there are times where if I'm meeting people, if I know that I'm going into a place that's maybe a bit dark, asking people to meet me outside, things like that, just practical things that just make things a bit easier for me.
How do you think law firms and other professional services organisations can better support colleagues with disabilities?
Well, I think the most obvious, I think there are two actually obvious ways that we could do that. I think the first is just by being more open about conversations, being more inquisitive and not shying away from asking people if they need help. And then I think the other piece for me is around the benefit of a network. So obviously we have Enable here, and I was involved as a co-chair of Enable for a long time, and in fact was part of Enable when it was first set up, which I can't even remember how long ago that is. It's probably 15 years ago, something like that. And I just think that the ability to meet as a group with the support network, the community, people with lots of different conditions, lots of different experiences, I just think that that is so important to embrace and to kind of take on board how other people experience a disability so that we can share as much as possible. And as I say, encourage people to have those conversations, because I think people are really fearful in some cases that they'll offend. And actually, most of the time, actually, that conversation is quite natural. And the more we can normalise those conversations, the better.
Yeah. How do you think Enable has sort of changed over the years? You mentioned that you've been involved sort of from near the beginning, and then you've led it for a number of years, and you're currently the partner sponsor for Enable. Looking back, what are you most proud of from the network?
I think when I look back, I think the realisation that at the outset, having the concept of a board sponsor would have really, I think, been a game changer, because it certainly was. And I remember our first board sponsors were Richard Bate, who retired this year, and Andrew Edgington. And between them, they brought, I think, a massive amount of enthusiasm, but also access to the board. So to be, truly committed to wanting to make changes. And they were both instrumental in actually making things happen in the firm. And I'm not going to go into the detail about sort of specific individuals, but really instrumental, really open to reverse mentoring. And I think that that really was the game changer. And then as a result of that, and with a variety of initiatives, and with a lot of support from the D&I team, what we've been able to do is increase membership, increase coverage, I suppose, of more disabilities. And that doesn't have to be, obviously, people who have a disability, but people with experience of family and friends, being able to bring that into the conversation. So I think that level of support is so different. I think we were all massively committed back in the day, but actually having that board sponsorship was the pivotal moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really important, isn't it, to have that senior leadership involvement and to help remove barriers, open doors, and just champion everything the network do.
Absolutely.
I'm just wondering, as you prepare to retire, what advice would you give to those that are carrying on Enable's work?
Just keep being the voice of people who perhaps don't feel that they have a voice. Keep asking for support. Keep asking for people to be involved. Work with the board sponsors. Work with the D&I team. And just carry on coming up with great ideas about how we can normalise the conversation.
Yeah. Good piece of advice. So we've talked about Enable, but I know that you've also been active in disability inclusion, sort of beyond the walls of Gowling WLG, and you've been involved with organisations like the Macular Society and then also Midlands Ability, which the firm was one of the founding partners of. What drives your involvement in these wider initiatives?
I think that from Macular Society perspective, it came about actually because of the talk that I did, because I was trying to find images so that I could put up on screen what it's like to have macular disease. And I was put in touch with a guy who's one of the fundraisers, I think, for the Macular Society. And we got into conversation, and eventually, over the period of time, he said, do you think you might want to be a trustee? We're looking for trustees with the condition because the board needs to have a certain number of people with a visual impairment. So I thought about it and I thought that sounds quite interesting. So I hopped on a train to Andover, ill prepared, read the trustees' report in the accounts, realised some of the challenges and was able to answer very knowledgeably some of the questions I was asked a bit on the hoof. And I spent my first 3 years as a trustee and was then invited to stand for another 3 years. So I retired back in 2023 after 6 years as a trustee, and it was just fascinating watching what the charity was doing. Obviously, from a personal perspective, really interested in the research that's going on, and I'm perhaps going to explore that further. I've been doing work actually over the years along with the team and other people in the firm for the RNIB. So I found that fascinating. So who knows where that might take me. Midlands Ability, again, the speaking opportunity came through that forum back in 2016, I think, from recollection. And they're doing great things, encouraging employers to engage with people, again, normalising the conversation, encouraging people to be supportive, and running a whole series of events, which I think we have access to even now.
Yeah. And what I really enjoy is the connections that you have, how they benefit everybody at the firm as well. So the work you've done with RNIB, you were very instrumental in us then going for the mark of being a visibly better employer. So I love that you're always pushing for us to do more and be better.
And I think actually that's one of the important factors, I think, in your own sort of disability journey. How could you contribute in different ways? How can you raise awareness? And again, I think that's where the networks such as Enable help galvanise those conversations, help spot those opportunities. And we know that from the variety of speakers that we have come in and the initiatives that we're involved with. So again, it's all a great way of expanding what the firm can offer. And I know from my own experience of talking to clients, we've worked with clients setting up their own disability networks, and that's been hugely welcomed by clients because obviously it's not the day job, but it's that bit of extra value and added value, the sort of the glue of the relationship.
It's a really important point you make about sort of what we can do with clients. What other sort of opportunities have you been able to identify?
Well, I remember a couple of years ago, I was actually looking at a programme for the annual conference for the European Employment Lawyers Association, which was due to be held in Bucharest in 2023. And I looked at the agenda and I went back and looked at other agendas from years prior to 2023. And there was nothing on disability, which I was really surprised about. So I contacted the kind of editorial board, if you like, and suggested we covered neurodiversity and invisible disability. And that was sort of snaffled up really quickly at relatively short notice. And the great opportunities there, well, a couple I can think of. The first is we were able to invite the head of D&I, a client, to come and be part of the panel. And my colleague Annette in our Frankfurt office, who wasn't with the firm at the time, came and spoke again as one of the panel members, along with a Swedish lawyer that we work with and a Romanian professor. We delivered the session and we just got the most fabulous feedback. And actually being able to involve the client as well as other lawyers to then be sort of leading the way, if you like. And that was a great opportunity and great fun.
Yeah. I must admit, part of my job that I enjoy most is when we get to work with clients on things, on joint initiatives around diversity and inclusion, and particularly around the disability topic. We'll take a short break now, and when we're back, we'll hear more from Anna on her experiences. Welcome back to part 2. We're going to kick off with some quickfire questions to get to know you a bit more, Anna. So, what is the most used app on your phone?
Well, at the moment, it's an app called Fit On. I signed up to a cancer research challenge for November, which is to do 30 minutes of sweaty exercise a day. And it's just got loads and loads of different exercises, strength, yoga, HIIT, and various different lengths. So, you could do something pretty short, or you could do sort of a 30-minute session. So yes, that's what I'm using most at the moment.
What's one word your friends would use to describe you?
Kind.
I like that. I'd agree with that one. What's a small thing that always makes you smile?
I think it's looking around. I listened to a podcast quite a while ago now about a monk talking about gratitude and talking about just stopping and just looking around. So particularly this time of year with the colours of the leaves, when I'm walking to the train station, or, even looking at the leaf fall and walking across the cathedral square, just taking in and really just enjoying the colours and the sounds of leaves crunching, that makes me smile.
That makes me smile thinking about that. So that's a good one. If you could instantly master one skill, what would it be?
Oh, being able to bake sourdough.
Is your bed made right now?
Yes.
Well done. What's your dream holiday destination?
Vietnam.
Oh, I'd like to go to Vietnam. Sweet or savoury?
Savoury.
Best sandwich?
Ooh, that's tricky, isn't it? A good BLT.
Favourite smell?
Freesias.
Text or call?
Cool.
Sunshine or snow?
Sunshine.
Are you more an introvert or extrovert?
Introvert.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
No, absolutely not.
And music or silence while working?
Oh, no, that's a depends, which is such a lawyer's answer, isn't it? If I'm feeling a bit sluggish, music. And if I'm not, silence.
Wanted to have a little bit of a think now of sort of those that are starting out their careers in law, or just thinking about a career in law. What advice would you give to somebody in that position who has a disability?
If you do have the confidence, ask for help. I'm reminded of, it's a book called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, where the message is essentially asking for help is the kind of strongest thing that you can do. A friend of mine bought me the book when I was recovering from shoulder surgery, and I read it and it just really resonated. So, ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. And if you are concerned, look for support from the network, because there will be people that will be able to help. Look for support from HR, D&I teams. I think we are hopefully beyond the days where people are absolutely reticent about coming forward. And I would really like to think that people, when they do ask, get the support that they need. And most of the changes that people need, they are really small. And what we tell our clients all the time is generally not very expensive. It's little things that make all the difference.
It is. I think it can be quite a vulnerable time when you first ask for help, particularly I think when you work in a profession where it's all about perfectionism, getting on, and you're having to talk about the things you struggle with. Can you remember back to when you sort of first reached out for any help? Did you feel that sort of like vulnerability?
Oh, absolutely. But I do remember my first access to work assessment. And the lady who came, she came all the way from the Blind College in Hereford, and we ended up talking about employee disputes, actually, ironically, because she was saying her experience, because she would give evidence in tribunal from time to time, was that things went wrong when people stopped talking to each other and that trust broke down. So for me, that was a really useful piece of advice. And I've always used that with clients ever since, that, keep the conversation going. It's unlikely to go badly or go badly wrong, but as soon as you stop talking and as soon as you stop checking in with people and actually asking if they're okay and if there's anything else that they need, then that's where things become more problematic.
Yeah, definitely. If you could change one thing about how society views disability, what would that be?
I think we need to really focus on what people can do and look less at what people can't do. And I think if we could get into that mindset, then I think we would just open up so much more opportunity, because there's still a massive disability employment gap. And there are people out there who undoubtedly are very capable, but just do not get the opportunity. So I think that it's about unlocking that talent.
Yeah, focusing on the strengths. And then finally, my last question for you is, what is the best thing that's happened to you over the last week? It can be work related, it can be personal life. What's the best thing that's happened?
I joined a running club in January and did my Couch to 5K. And I go every Sunday morning when I can. And I love it because I love all the people and the chats that we have as we're running around. And it makes running much more fun than running on a treadmill. And on Sunday, we did one of the coaches, he's called Jeff. We did one of Jeff's specials, which was we ran round the town I live in, which is Shrewsbury, and had a bit of sort of guided tour of unusual things. So we were shown the plaque that is near what is currently the library. It used to be Shrewsbury School, where Charles Darwin was at school. We were shown various sites, and it was explained to us about, the historical significance of these sites and so on. And his historical runs, or runs of interest, or I don't know, he comes up with all sorts of imaginative ideas. Really, really interesting. So, you're running and learning at the same time. So that was brilliant.
That makes running sound much more appealing to me, to have like a bit of a history lesson at the same time. Thank you, Anna, so much for joining us today. Really been great to talk to you. And I just want to wish you all the best in your retirement when that arrives. And make sure you stay in touch.
I will do. And thanks, Emma. It's been a pleasure.
A huge thank you to Anna for joining us today and sharing such a powerful and personal story. Anna's legacy, spanning 3 decades at Gowling WLG, and her trailblazing work in disability inclusion will continue to shape our culture long after her retirement this December. Thank you to everyone for listening to this series of the Space podcast, and we'll be back next year with more stories from Gowling WLG.